to our webinar on security across exam modalities. Are we having the right conversations? I'm Rachel Schoenig, and I have the joy of being your moderator for this webinar. I'm an attorney and a CEO at Cornerstone Strategies, where we provide strategic planning and exam security and product design services to the industry. And I also have the joy of serving as the vice chair of the Exam Security Committee. And on behalf of the committee, we're very excited to bring you this webinar today. Our goal in our discussion today is really to move beyond what we've had for several years now, which is a comparison between in-person proctoring and remote proctoring, and really take it to a level of helping different testing programs look at ways to design your program and to design your security using security layers and different security controls to meet your unique needs. And we have an amazing panel to do that today. I was saying as we were preparing, I think this is the first time that I have seen a panel where participants are all in the same vertical and have very similar use cases and stakes to their exams, and have made different decisions about how they're going to go about delivery and how they're going to go about securing those exams. So all of our participants have English language exams, and I'm going to ask each of them to go ahead and introduce themselves, starting with Bassem.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today for this panel. My name is Bassem Beg. I'm a director of engineering here at Duolingo, where I've been leading exam security for the past 6 years. My background is in cybersecurity. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I'm going to pass it on to Claire.
Yeah, hi, and great to see everybody. I'm from Cambridge University Press and Assessment, and we're based in the UK, but we operate globally, delivering millions of English language assessments every year.
And Wally.
Thank you. Wally Dalrymple. I'm the Chief Security Officer at ETS and PSI. And like Bassem, my background is in cybersecurity, and I've been in the industry for the last 4 years.
And we are going to ask attendees to please keep your cell phones handy, because we are going to do some polling for this session. We want to hear from you and kind of get the wisdom of the crowd in this. We also have Q&A turned on. So if you have any questions, please feel free to drop those in the Q&A box, and we'll be monitoring that. And if we can get it, you kind of slide that into some of our questions and preparation that we've made for today, we'll definitely do that. But we also have a treat, because the security committee is going to host a coffee chat, and we're going to just have some open dialogue. Any Q&A we don't get to today, we will get to and have some open dialogue in July. So if we don't get to your questions now, we will definitely make note of those, and we'll follow up then. Finally, just really quickly, there is accessibility features in Zoom. If you go down to the More button down there and you click that, you can use that to see a variety of accessibility options and turn on captions if you would like. Okay, with that, we're going to ask all of you to please grab your cell phones, and we're going to take our first poll. Because what we would like to do is know a little bit more about who we have on our call today. So we are looking to see how your programs are currently delivering your exams. And we have a number of options for that. And I think there it is. There's our poll. It just came up. So your options are you're delivering, and if you have multiple programs and you're delivering in multiple ways, you get to select more than one. So don't be limited by that. Some of you may be delivering in-person testing with live proctors on controlled devices. Some of you may be using remote testing, and some of you may be doing a hybrid. So we've given you plenty of options there. And while people are answering those, Claire, I'd love to go to you and ask you, please, to just kind of give a little context. When we think about in-person testing at test centers, that can occur in a wide variety of test centers. So let's kind of share some of the ways that we've been thinking about test centers.
Sure. So test centers can be a permanent location. So it could be a business with a permanent location where they run tests every day. But also sometimes centers operate across, let's say, 20, 30, 40 different cities. They might not have a permanent location in each of those. So what they'll do is they'll hire a venue. It could be a lab at a university. It could be a conference room in a hotel. And then they'll run exams there in that location, sort of based on local demand. And then also, if you operate in the schools market, what happens is sometimes centres go into a school and run the test using the school premises, so the kids can take the test in, the familiar environment. So test centres are a range of different things, sometimes permanent locations, sometimes ones that are hired specifically for the event.
Thank you. Okay, so let's see how we're doing on our responses here. And wow, looks like we have a wide variety of folks. So it looks like the majority are in person with a live proctor on controlled devices, meaning controlled maybe by a school or by that test center. Some are doing what we sometimes call BYOD, bring your own device, where it's in person but on a candidate's device. And then we have some record and review remote testing, some AI monitored testing. Almost 50% are using remote testing with live proctors. And then we have 20% that are using a hybrid. And then we have other, and there are plenty of other ways that assessments are delivered. So thank you, everyone. We appreciate you responding to that. We actually don't go yet. So we had about 20% of our folks respond to the poll that they are delivering assessments with hybrid. And it looks like we've got 45 or so percent that are delivering remote in some fashion. We want to, for our next poll, hear from you and find out a little bit about your views on remote test delivery. Now, this goes for everyone, not just those who are delivering remotely, but we want to know your views on remote test delivery. So we actually asked this to be a little provocative here. So we had a fun time putting these answers together, but we want to know, what are your views on remote test delivery? And that can range anywhere from we love it, it gives us wherever, whenever access, to hey, we're using it, we're thinking about stopping it, to we use it, and frankly, I hate it, to we don't use it and I wouldn't touch it, to we don't use it, but we're exploring adding it. So let us know kind of where you're at, what your thinking is right now with remote proctoring, because that is a big part of all of the programs here that we're going to talk to today. They all have remote proctoring options to them. And it is a really important part of access, as many testing programs have discovered, not only obviously through COVID, but today getting us access into many different parts of the world that don't have more traditional testing centers that we would typically use. So Nina, I'm going to ask you just to go ahead and show us, how does the polling look? We didn't take any bets on this. So, oh, I love this. So this is so interesting. We love it is 31%. We use it, but we're thinking about stopping is 21%. The haters are going to hate. They're here, 22% of our haters. And we've got 16% who are like, hey, I don't use it and I'm not going to use it. And then about 10% of you are thinking about adding it. So I think this is such a great opportunity, especially for those 10% that are giving this some thought, to hear some of the different considerations that go on out there. So thank you, Nina, and thank you to all of you for responding to that. We're going to get into some of our panel questions now. Oftentimes when we talk about different delivery modalities, we rarely have those conversations when we've got testing programs that are in the same vertical, same use cases. So we talked about this at the start, and we've talked about this several times during our preparation, how wonderful I think it is that this is going to be more of an apples to apples discussion, because all of our programs here are English language testing programs, and all of them have a variety of different means that they use to actually deliver their exams. So we do have English language assessments that can be delivered on a candidate's device. We talked about that as BYOD. They could be delivered remotely at home or in a workplace or on school-owned or test-centered devices or in classrooms. And we know that some programs, as we saw, have AI reviews, some are record reviews, some are live reviews. So I want to go to our panelists. And Bassam, I'm going to start with you. How is Duolingo first used? And then what are your delivery options and how did you reach those decisions?
Absolutely. So I would say, being an English test, the primary use case that Duolingo English Test started with was high stakes admissions in the US, being that Duolingo is a US based company, organically sort of started here In fact, funny story, originally people were learning English on the learning app and then needed to prove to their employer, to their university or whoever, hey, I actually learned English. And so they asked us for certificates, which is why
Ah,
we got into this in the first place. And now it's gone quite beyond that, being used for admissions, for immigration, for placement, and even for employment in certain parts of the world. In terms of delivery, I think we were very much champions of remote delivery wherever, whenever access from the very start. And I think access is one of the things that's super important to Duolingo and all the stakeholders that we work with. So for that reason, it's remotely delivered, it's asynchronous, so it's record and review, and everything basically gets evaluated after the fact. It is also bring your own device, so you use your own laptop, you use your own phone as the secondary camera as well.
thank you. Okay, Wally, let's go to ETS's language assessments and kind of same questions. How are they used? How have you set up your delivery and what were your drivers for that?
Yeah, so ETS, our largest language assessment exam is TOEFL. It's globally used. It's used not just for admissions into colleges and universities. In some instances, it's used for immigration, right? And immigration authorities use this information and these scores to make real consequential decisions.
Mhm.
So as Bassam said, these are high stakes. These impact people's lives, right? And where they want to go. So our hybrid model was, providing global mobility to any test taker looking to pursue their educational goals, reaching, anywhere in the world. And in some locations, as we've talked about, the world's a big place, right? So there's not always a test center or test center infrastructure in every part of the world where if you're supporting global mobility in test takers, you have to have multiple ways and accessibility ways for them to use your product, right, for their goals and objectives. So we look at it as providing a choice, and that's an objective of ours is access anywhere from any time, right? That would be
Yeah.
sort of the panacea for all of us is to be able to provide our assessments 24/7 to any location in the world. And obviously, from a security perspective, without compromising being able to provide that service and that ability without compromising the score acceptance.
So, Wally, you had said you deliver hybrid. So tell me just a little bit, what does your test center delivery look like? And then let's talk about what your remote delivery looks like.
Yeah, so for test center, we strategically have test centers located around the world, in the 25,000 plus test centers. Some are owned and managed by us, and some are used through third parties. But the goal is wherever the test center is, it is an ETS or a PSI in my instance as well, a test
Mhm.
center, and they can be used interchangeably. But the goal is for a location for someone to come in that maybe doesn't have the infrastructure at home. Maybe they don't have internet access at home, or it's just not reliable. And since this is so important for them, they want to make sure they don't have any distractions. They want to make sure that they're ready to go into a location that they're not going to have any technology disruptions or anything that could impact their test. So the test center environment is super important, and it's something that ETS and PSI have been founded on. It's really the remote proctoring, the hybrid capability, and I think that forced a lot of us to deliver it. The pandemic forced us to deliver
Right.
it faster than maybe some of us were ready. But now that we are, I would say, mature in our remote proctoring capabilities. Now we actually have offer the ability for people that can't hop on a plane, train, and an automobile and go 8 hours out of their way to again pursue their global educational goals and have the ability to take an assessment and exam in their own home and feel comfortable that it's an environment that we feel that they will be able to get the same score that they can achieve in a test center from remote delivery as well.
So Boston told us that they have asynchronous or it's recorded and then reviewed after the fact. Do you have live proctoring? What is your proctoring like during your remote delivery?
Yeah, so we do both, right? So it is record,
Okay.
but it's live proctoring. So we record the session, but we have a live proctor there.
Okay.
In case of, right, there's any challenges, any technical things that are outside of the test taker's control, but also just to provide that comfort, right? It's a comfort level that there's someone there that can help that candidate, and they can reach out to them via voice or chat, whatever means that they would like to choose from. But it's a hybrid model, so we want to be able to support both. We record it and we watch it back from a test security perspective. But again, for the honest test taker, it should be seamless to them.
Thank you. Okay, now we're going to go to Claire. And Claire, Cambridge has a number of English language assessments. Some I know you deliver remotely, some are in test centers, some are hybrid. Some you will only deliver in test centers. So I'd love to hear from you a little bit what you're doing and why there's a distinction.
Sure. So as you said, we've got a range of products, and so some of these will be used for access to employment, access to higher education. Some are recognized by a number of immigration authorities, and then some are also used within the school system. And so we've got these range of different use cases. So what we look at is what's appropriate for each.
Okay.
And that's appropriate as in what the customer might want, and also looking at the integrity of the results. So to give a couple of examples, for the global schools market, we find that generally they're not really interested in remote proctoring at the moment. In most schools environments, they want the kids to come into school and take the test. So we keep that as test center only. But amongst the other markets, we find that there is some interest, and so we offer a hybrid model for some of our products. What's interesting to track with the hybrid model is a lot of people are still interested in going into a center. And we find that that's for things like in some parts of the world, they just at home don't have access to stable internet or a quiet space to take the exam, and they just sometimes want to be able to go to a center. So in some cases, we'll offer that hybrid model for that sort of reason. But what's really important to us is the integrity of the result. And we do find that with, again, looking at these use cases, there are certain threats with online testing that maybe require different mitigations from in-center ones. And people try to commit malpractice across any kind of mode of delivery. But with certain use cases, that sophistication that we see in those attempts at malpractice plays into our decision making. And some of this, is linked to organized crime. There's some very serious attempts to commit malpractice. So we want to make sure that every result has, the correct integrity levels, and that we choose the right delivery mode for each use case and the threat profile.
And for your remote testing then, do you have some that are record and review? Do you have some that are live proctored? Kind of how do you handle those?
Yep, so we have a product with live remote proctoring, and we have a product where it's record and then reviewed afterwards. Every single video is watched afterwards. Again, we're looking at the different products with different uses. So we adapt our delivery mode depending on that use case.
Thank you. Well, so all of you have kind of arrived at different decisions in terms of delivery, very similar use cases. And I think we can all agree that, it doesn't matter whether you are delivering in a brick and mortar test center that is set up only for test delivery, or whether you're delivering remotely. There are risks, as Claire said. There are, people who are trying to undermine the integrity of what we're doing. We've certainly seen those risks evolve over the last 5 years. I think, especially with the pandemic, we started to see a lot more commercial cheating and businesses that just really targeted, flat out said, we're here to help you cheat kind of approach. And so I want to talk with you guys a little bit about how your strategy to address those risks maybe has evolved over the last 5 years. And Claire, I'm going to go ahead and start with you. Go ahead, Claire.
Sorry, that cut out a minute. It was me. Sorry, it just cut out a minute there. Yeah, I mean, in terms of looking at what's changed and how we react to it, we're always looking at threat modeling and looking at how people might commit malpractice on a test. And obvious things that have changed over recent years would be AI. A lot more people trying to use that. And so we look at what layers of security we need to have in place to deal with that. And we might put in place some different mitigations around remote testing, for example, in-center, because there's some different scenarios. And we test all of these out in our lab to check that they're effective before we roll them out. What we're really looking at is, for example, with AI, how would a person access it? How would they use it in the test? And what can we do to prevent that and detect it?
Okay. How about you, Basim? What are you seeing?
Sure. So as I said earlier, we are remote delivery with record and review. So we primarily focus on any type of threats that can emerge where you bring your own device or you have more control over your physical space. And technology plays a really key part here, Rachel, because what we see with our adversaries, our shared adversaries that we're all trying to fight against, is that they will always try to find the path of least resistance, which
Yeah.
is they want to use the simplest methods, they want to use the cheapest methods. And so as technology is evolving, they are leveraging it as much as possible. So I'll give you a few examples here, a few concrete examples of the trends that we've seen in the last few years. First, I would say 5 years ago, you were much more likely to see somebody using your traditional plagiarism, actually trying to go to a brain dump website, trying to memorize content, trying to access content on online blogs or articles that you would provide you with templated responses or pre-written essays and things. And I've seen a real meaningful shift from that to using real human provided bespoke content.
Mm.
Because they all know that plagiarism is a problem that we worked really hard to solve. And we have now really good indices of the data and sample responses that are present out there. There is obviously some amount of AI usage as well there, as Claire said, but I think across the industry, we've been developing more GPT detector-like things as well. And so that's pushing that away a little bit too. I think human helpers have make a huge return in many cases. I also see a drastic decrease in people trying to use the simplest types of methods, which would be hooking on an additional keyboard or an additional monitor, input or output device type of manipulation. So that's really fallen off of a cliff. And the method that I see sort of soaring in popularity right now, and I think even from talking to some of my colleagues, this is not just for remote, but also for in person, is specialized hardware.
Mm.
As hardware has got miniaturized, both in terms of auditory, like hidden earbuds, as well as hidden cameras to transmit the test content to somebody else. I think these types of devices, I mean, you can go on Amazon and buy these for like tens of
Right.
dollars, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think for us, the trend really is in the sophistication of the hardware side, and coupling that with human helpers.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, and I think that's a good reminder, Bassam, that some of these risks that we're talking about, depending on how you've set up your delivery platform and where you're delivering and how you're delivering, it's not really about whether it's in center or it's remote. It's about other layers of security, not just your lockdown browser, not just your proctor, but various other security layers that you've used. I do know with all of you, you have record and review capabilities. So even if you may have a live proctor, you're able to go back and review content later. Bossum, you do yours all asynchronously. And we did have a question come in saying, how do you review a large volume of video like that? Are you flagging particular candidates for review? And do you have a dedicated staff to review your videos? So, Bossum, I'm going to flip that back to you.
Sure, that's a great question, actually. So, we basically review every single video that comes through. So, every video is looked at by a human proctor, and then every human proctor only looks at one recorded video at a time. I think this is just, we have a strong belief that multitasking is pretty difficult. And so, when you're browsing through all of this data, we do couple that with AIs, though. So, we have AIs that will signal if they find any anomalies. So, for example, I talked about hidden earbuds earlier. We have developed an in-house technology called earbud detection, where we use your phone to detect if there's a hidden earbud in your ear. Now, obviously, that's going to be very difficult for a human proctor to visually inspect that in the video. But what would happen is they would get a signal saying, hey, at minute 15, second 30, seems like the person is using an hidden earbud. Then they can couple that with the behavioral signals that are only coming in from the nuanced judgment of the human decision maker. In terms of staffing, I think we have, to support the volume that we currently have, we have several hundred human proctors that are also distributed all over the world. And there's sort of like a queue of tests is all coming in from the one end because people are taking it anytime, anywhere. And on the other end, proctors are randomly getting assigned these record and review tasks so they can go through these sessions.
And do you have anything that you use, Bossum, to tell the difference between a hidden earbud versus a hearing aid?
Oh, absolutely. So I think we have an accommodations process. So you want to make sure that if you're a test taker who wants to use some kind of medical device and not just hearing aids, but let's say accessibility software, because all types of software will also get blocked when you're using a testing application. Uh,
Right.
and so for that, reason, you have to submit some doctor's notes, some documentation that's medical. Our customer support team reviews that thoroughly. And as long as you submit that before you actually take the test, that information is available to the proctor during the proctoring session. So they can make the requisite concessions for that.
Thank you. I think one common theme that has come up across all of your responses here has been that anytime, anywhere testing. Bossum, you were just talking about, you have a queue because people are testing anytime, anywhere. And I think about this for all of our exams. If our tests are doing good in the world, then we want people who are eligible to take those tests to be able to get to them and be able to leverage and benefit the good that can come from those exams. So I would be curious to have you just talk a little bit about the lessons that you have learned in trying to balance the, access to the exam with the need to make sure that there's security in the delivery and that the results can be trusted. So I'm going to start again with you, Bassam.
Thanks, Rachel. Yeah, this actually is a favorite topic of mine because as we all know, our job is security, right? So we want to make sure the test is as secure as possible. And so sometimes I think there's this feeling that we can get that, there's a bunch of bad guys out there, everybody's bad, the world is like a really bad place. But I think, and my colleagues will agree with this as well, overwhelming majority of test takers are not cheating.
Right.
Most test takers are actually honest. And they're just trying to get through this gate so that they can go change their life, get an admission, whatever. So I have a little anecdote here of something that was a little bit surprising for us, but I really has stayed with me over the years. When we first introduced secondary camera, using your phone as a secondary camera, we were really worried about friction. We were really worried about honest test takers just having a bad time and saying, hey, what is this? I have to do this extra thing now. Um, but actually, what happened was, even though we were catching more cheaters and we were adding more friction for the cheaters, the honest test takers overwhelmingly loved that feature, even though it did mean a little bit more work for them. And the reason is we talked to them and we also looked at the rates in our backend data is because there are those moments when a proctor would have some suspicion. Hey, you keep looking off screen. What is actually happening off screen? Why are you looking there? And so they would have to invalidate the test in that reason. And now, because they have a vantage point, they can see everything that's happening in the room, the test is going to get validated because the suspicious look off screen was actually just your cat jumping on the table. In fact, we have videos where there's people pets in the room, which is totally fine. That's not against the rules. And because the proctor can see that on the secondary camera, they get a better outcome. And so I think sometimes we can overthink and think that, hey, this feature is just going to cause friction for honest test takers, and that's not a good thing, and we shouldn't do it. Honest test takers want to give you more signal. They want to show you that they're honest. And sometimes you can cause friction for cheaters without causing friction for honest test takers. So I really love that takeaway for me.
Yeah, I think that is a phenomenal takeaway. It is something that I think as exam security professionals, we talk about frequently, which is, oh no, is it going to create a barrier to access or is it going to, as you said, create more friction for users? And I think realizing that a security tool that we put in place is not necessarily going to be looked at askance just because it does add a little extra friction. Wally, I'd love your take on this.
Yeah, friction, right? We talk a lot about friction for the honest test taker and certain controls and certain things during the either registration process or the time of test add a little bit more delay to it. But the whole goal, right, of test security is to cause friction for the bad actors. That's the whole design and intent.
Right.
So every control, every policy is really meant to raise challenges for the bad actors, the cost for the channel, the cost of the bad actors being able to access or commit fraud in our systems, the effort that is required for them, right? Security is always about making it as hard as possible for the bad guys to commit fraud and as easy as possible for the honest test takers to just not even know that security is there, right? So the honest test taker sees security as something that is enabling them to be successful. The cheating organization, right? They're the ones that are looking at it like, oh wow, they have a lot of controls in place. How do I get around these controls? What do I need to do to get around these controls? Because essentially they're running a business and they're getting paid for their services.
Right.
And their services disrupt and reduce the credibility of our programs and what we deliver. So our goal is to not allow them to disrupt our businesses where we are actually disrupting their businesses. So it is, and it's not a one size fits all either, right? So the different modalities do require different security controls and different methodologies to support them. It could be countries with different regulations and different requirements. They have their own local fraud economy, right? So you do have to look at, what controls you're putting in place, what the impact is to the honest test taker, but then also behind the scenes, what is it that you're mitigating risk for those bad actors that are trying to commit fraud on your product?
Yeah, I also I appreciate that thought of creating friction for the bad guys. And also I think it's very important as we go through here for attendees to remember that one size doesn't fit all. So you may have aspects of your program that are exactly like Bossum's or exactly like Wally's, and aspects that are different. I think, Claire, your suite of assessments, it's kind of the poster child for that concept that one size doesn't fit all, because you not only have different programs with different delivery and security requirements, but you even have different options even within one program.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd like to say I agree with everything that Bassam and Wally have said. And whenever we're looking at what security measures to put in place, you're absolutely right. I think Wally said it's not a one size fits all approach. We do need to look at what's appropriate for each use case, and within that, sometimes what's appropriate for each market, each cohort. And so we'll have some additional measures perhaps for a particular product. But what's really important to us is whenever we're looking at, we work with our colleagues in customer experience design. So what's that customer journey? How can we put in place that security measure in a way that causes friction for the bad actors, but takes into consideration the vast majority of test takers who are honest, who are not trying to cheat, and consider what impact it'll have on them. And it's really important to us to consider fairness in terms of security, so not letting people cheat, but also fairness of those access arrangements that you mentioned earlier as well. So it's all about balancing all of those and really considering that customer journey. And sometimes it's about explaining to people and helping them understand, because the honest person might look at it and say, well, I wouldn't cheat, but some people do. So we help them understand why some measures are in place.
Yeah, I want to kind of take that a little bit further because, Claire, I know you deliver hybrid, and Wally, I know you deliver hybrid as well. So for the same exam, a test taker could choose either to test in a test center or to test remotely. And I would love to know, what are one or two lessons that you've learned about creating a standardized and consistent experience for test takers when you're offering that kind of hybrid delivery? Claire, do you want to start us off on that?
Sure. Yeah. So like I mentioned, the customer journey bit is really important, and I think it's really useful to look at the whole end to end of that assessment. So how is the assessment built? How is it delivered? What's that customer experience when they register, when they take the test, after the test? All the different things that could be impacted, and really think about that customer experience and how you can embed security and integrity, but taking into account the impacts. And I think what we do that I would recommend anybody in the same situation does is we do comparison studies. So we'll do research and we'll look at what are the outcomes. Are the outcomes of the test, so basically the results, are they affected in any way by these differences? And we'll do trialing and testing to work that out and see, is it an equivalent outcome regardless of how you've taken the test and where you've taken the test? So we put a lot into that research and that trialing to make sure that the outcomes are valid and equivalent regardless of how or where you've taken the test. So those comparison studies are absolutely key.
So that's been an important lesson learned on your end. How about you, Wally?
Yeah, absolutely. It is. We've all heard that phrase, it's all about the data, right? And it is, and it's about how you use that data. So, one of the things that Claire mentioned is sort of identifying, what the risks are, right? And you need data to identify the risks. And so I think that, one of the things that that you should have in place is some sort of structured threat hunting program, right? Where you're actually looking at risk and identifying what those risks are to your program across different modalities, across different countries, and across your entire suite of programs. And it's not really, and I think when I talk about data in telemetry, it's not looking at the data as a point in time, right? So if you're only looking, for example, at second camera and for one test at one point in time, then you're really not leveraging your data, right? Because it's just data from a point in time. What you need to do is leverage your data across a long period of time across different security controls where you're aggregating all of those threats. So we talk about using AI for getting threat alerts for proctors, either in live real time or in record and review. It's again, it's about how you use that data and how a human reviews that data, and then what are you going to do with the data once you get it, and then how are you using that across all your programs, right? Because the world is a big place, and so if you identify that someone committed fraud on Claire's exam at Cambridge, well, what happens if that same person goes and takes the same test or a different test, an English test, with Duolingo, right? So I do think you have to look at how these organized cheating rings operate and what their mode of operation is, identify the risk, put together a risk program, and then actually use the data so that you can mitigate that risk going forward.
Yeah, so a couple of different lessons learned then. So one is do that front end research that Claire was talking about. Make sure you're monitoring that to understand that hybrid delivery, that you can feel confident that those results are comparable. And then on the back end, make sure that you're using your data effectively, not just looking at a single exam instance and
Right.
using just that data. Actually look at it from a trending perspective, look at it in the aggregate, so that you can actually get to that big picture and really understand what's going on out there. And that can help you understand, do you just have a one-off instance of misconduct? Or do you have those emerging cheating businesses that you've been
Yes.
talking about, Wally? Well, everyone's mentioned them,
Yes.
because we've definitely seen them growing. Because those types of activities are systemic and they're not going to give up because they've basically built a business off the back of your exam. And that's going to have a much deeper impact on your score validity and trust in your program
Correct.
over time.
Yeah, because Rachel, to your point, it's typically not a one and done type of scenario,
Right,
right?
right, right,
I'm not
right.
just going to help Claire pass her English test and say, okay, that's all I was there for, right? That's all my purpose was. While that does happen, right, that is not the prevalent organized cheating that we see that impacts all of our programs. It is the ones that are making a living doing this,
Right.
unfortunately, and that's why we're here today.
Yeah, absolutely. So we did have a question come in asking, are there any performance markers which show AI use in a candidate's performance, especially in, for example, the writing or the speaking tasks? And Bassam, I'm going to go to you just to answer that briefly, if that's okay.
Sure, absolutely. I think there's two main features that we really think about, at least here at Duolingo. One is just LLM text generation. So we just directly try to see if the text that you've produced looks very much like LLM text. We published a paper on this if you guys are interested in the technical details. The other signal that we also use, again, going back to the concept of layers that both Wally and Claire have mentioned earlier, is copy typing. So when you are typing from original thought versus when you are typing from listening to something or reading something, your keystroke data will look quite different. And so based on that, we can tell whether you are typing in original content or not. And so I think a combination of both of these, obviously you still need the human proctor. So when these signals come up, basically what the human proctor does is they go to that part of the video and then they check for bodily behaviors that also back up that you're actually copy typing. Are you reading something? Are you waiting to listen to something? I will say one good thing is like speaking is the hardest to cheat on. That is just generally true across the board, no matter what type of modality it is. And so we also looked at scoring differences. So because you are scored at an individual question or item level, we do see quite a big difference in people who are cheating on the writing parts and not cheating on the speaking parts. You can see quite like a CIFAR level differences between those two types of modalities.
Yeah, very interesting. Okay, we're going to turn to some technology questions now and start with some advances. And we're going to start also with our attendees. So we want you guys to go back and grab your phones because this is actually a polling question. And our question is, what technology advances do you anticipate will shape the future of exam security and delivery? And that could be positive or negative. So go ahead and use your phone. This is a Slido. So you can either go to the URL, slido.com, or you can just turn your camera on and click on the QR code and it'll take you there. And this is a word cloud. You can enter multiple words and answers. That is just fine. But we would love to know from you what technology advances you anticipate are going to shape the future of exam security and delivery. And I know obviously we talked about some here. Okay. I was just going to say AI, and clearly everyone is on that same wavelength there. Uh, so embedded AI that is very difficult for us to shut off in some ways because it's just become embedded into the software, particularly with BYOD, I think will be very interesting, just the way that's going to be helping us without even having to feel like you're turning to a new software. Spoofing, deep fakes, avatars. Someone said no idea, which is totally fair. Wearables, and we did have a question come up around how programs are approaching things like wearables, like new Meta glasses or any of those smart glasses that are out there. I just saw some I didn't buy them, so I don't know if they actually work, but they were $19.99. But different types of smart glasses that are out there, the video buttons that you were talking about, Bossum, with that kind of more miniaturized hardware out there. As these are coming in, any insight on how you are approaching those Meta glasses and things like that? Claire, do you mind starting on that one, and then I'll go to Wally?
Sure. Yeah. Whenever we sort of see new things being offered online, we usually purchase them and then we try them out in the lab, and we're looking at how would they be used. So again, what ways would somebody use them to cheat in an exam? Is it to give them access to AI? Is it access to outside help? And then we're looking at what can we do to prevent it in the first place. So it's all about those layers of security. Are there things we can put in place in the lockdown browser or elsewhere that prevent somebody from using that? But also, again, to Wally's point earlier, is the data. If anything gets through those initial layers of security, what data can we use to indicate use of that particular device or particular method of malpractice, and joining that data and intelligence up across multiple sessions is very, very useful for us. So it's all about the layers and experimenting with it in the lab and trying it out. And it's quite good fun sometimes actually trying out these different devices, and seeing just how cheap and easy they are to get, and then looking at, well, how would I use it, and and how would I prevent it?
Very interesting. So I am going to go to Wally, and then I'm going to ask, we're going to go ahead and leave the slide up, but then we're going to go to our panelists for some of their thoughts on this. Wally, do you want to talk a little bit about wearables or
Yeah.
smart glasses?
Yeah. To build off of what Claire was saying is, you buy the technology, and we talked about technology, that was, in the pandemic and what those threats were. You look at the technologies here on June 24th in 2026. Rachel, when we do this again 5 years from now, ask this same question because
Yeah.
it will change, right? We might
Right.
see some things like AI, just maybe different flavors of AI that are out there, and things like wearables, right? These are where you test out the technology because you want to understand how it's being used against you, right?
Right.
So that's where you get into, okay, what is the attack vector that this particular technology, and regardless of whether it's wearables or AI, is being used against us? It could be, and then you look at your threats. So wearables with the meta glasses could be used for item harvesting. Right. So if they're, and we call these like 0-day threats. So if there's a threat like wearables come out and you train your people on what to look for it, and you're building as many layers as you can. But if you don't have an exact technology to address the wearables, which isn't really the point of a layered security architecture, because if you're just building controls to fight every threat one on one, then you're always going to be behind. So if you look at wearables and you're saying, well, do we have anything in our, what threat is it trying to go after? What's the attack vector? Do we have any control in place? And if we do, how many, right? What are the layers that will detect this wearable, this new technology? And then you have those in place. You study the environment, you study the behaviors, as Bassam said. You focus on trying to identify it and shift left as quickly as possible. Because if like the threat is item harvesting as an example, well, one of the things when you're building your security layers is to prevent item harvesting, don't let them see the items, right? That's the preventive part of test security. If you can't see the items, you can't steal the items, can't memorize the items, I can't copy the items. So you want to make sure that your layers are in place, addressing the threat, and then take these technologies, put them in those buckets of layers, and then look at the controls you have across people, process, and technology, because the technology supports all of it. It's the foundational part of it. But then look at that and say, do we have the right mitigations in place? It might not be 100% because no one's 100%, but have you built a program where you have the confidence to be able to share with your partners, with your customers, that you have the right program in place to detect such a technology like wearables? And as wearables, as you mentioned, come down in price, Rachel, so will the value of them. They won't provide the same value that the cheaters think they provide, and they will move on. We'll always have ways to detect it, but there will be a new threat that replaces it in the near future.
Yeah. I think that is something that we want to think about. Two things, just to follow up on that. One is we can never stop everything, right? Humans are inventive. It's been a truism for, as long as we can go back and look at written history, at least. We have seen people try and find ways around rules. And so, as you said, Wally, I think we're definitely going to see, you know, new types of creative ways to come out, especially as we start, Bossum said they're going to try and take the easiest route. When we close that easy route off, they're going to go to the next easiest one. So we're going to constantly be evolving. I want to come back to you, Wally, and just talk a little bit about, we had talked, are there one or two technologies that you anticipate will shape security and delivery in the future? And I told our panelists that they couldn't say AI. And Wally, your response had been smart glasses. So I want to just kind of continue with that conversation a little bit on the smart glasses and how you see that, sort of impacting and shaping where we're at today.
Yeah, so we've all I'm sure seen the videos where smart glasses are being used, and we do see those threats coming in. So you know, uh, you start with a policy. Do you have a policy that says you can't wear smart glasses? Because
Now I'm going to pause there because what are you going to say to me if I say, but Wally, my smart glasses have my prescription lenses in there?
Yes, then we are going to allow you to take that test, right? But it doesn't mean that it's like, okay, I'm just going to walk away and I'm not going to not monitor you, right? I'm not going to have a test security investigator maybe look at your case after it's done. I'm not going to have like certain controls in place to identify if your behavior has changed versus other behavior with people with like prescription glasses on, right? So again, the goal is not to say, you know what, you're wearing wearables and so you must be cheating, right? That's not the assumption that we need to go in with, right? The assumption is allowing people with prescription or accessibility needs to be able to confidently, but also securely being able to take that exam and that assessment so that we feel confident at the end of the day, at the end of that they did not commit fraud, right? And then we will identify, when wearables first came out, there was like a little red light, right? You could identify, well, Meta and all the other manufacturers are like, oh no, we'll just embed it so now there's no light, right? And so it's the same thing when we have a meeting during our normal corporate lives. We're recording the meeting. You tell everybody, you disclose you're recording the meeting. If you're wearing prescription wearables, disclose that you're wearing prescription wearables, and we will have the processes to make sure that that's a safe and secure experience for you going forward.
Are there, just out of curiosity, Bassam or Claire, do you handle the use of like smart glasses that have prescription lenses any differently?
Well,
No,
I think just
go ahead,
what,
Kier.
no, what, sorry, Bassam. I was just going to say, it sort of goes back to a point that Wally was making earlier about data. I think one of the things with wearables is you cannot rely purely on visual checks for things. And I think we really need to look at that use of data. So it may be that somebody says, I need to wear them because of it's got my prescription lenses in it. Well, that's fine. But what data do we want to use to check whether in wearing those glasses, they may or may not have committed malpractice? So what data can we use to do those checks? And that comes down to things like the behavioral analytics, the looking for use of AI, or however they might have used it to cheat if they were to do so. So that data is really important in detecting any anomalies or any issues,
Right.
rather than relying on a visual check, for example. And so somebody might have meta glasses, and if we don't, whether we know it or not, what data checks do we have in place to see if they might have used them for a purpose that they shouldn't?
Yeah,
Right.
and I do know that there's some testing programs that say, sorry, you can't come in with your smart glasses. Just you're going to have to, we warned you before you got here. You're going to have to go
Yeah.
either change them out or reschedule and take it another time when you have your other prescription lenses with you.
Yeah.
Awesome. Anything on your?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah. I think so. To Wally's point, again, just gonna double down on that is like you need layers. And if the only layer you're relying on is knowing for certain that they're wearing smart glasses and you have some silver bullet to catch that, they're gonna figure out a way around that. So you're gonna still need to look at behavioral signals. You're gonna still need to look at data, like Claire is saying as well. But Rachel, I'd also say like, when phones first came out, smartphones, we were, if you're in a classroom, you were really worried about cheating that can happen through a smartphone. And look, now smartphones are one of our best tools as a secondary camera. And the fact that we have access to that secondary camera gives us so much more of a vantage point. So I'm personally quite excited for a future where wearables are completely democratized, cheap, and everybody has them. Because guess what? Your honest test taker is gonna want to wear them and give you access to them. And so then you will actually have access to those smart glasses or wearables and be able to get even more data about what's happening in the room itself. So I think in the short term, I think wearables obviously are a threat, but I think in the long term, they might actually help us out more than the cheaters.
Claire, I'm going to just go to you just really quickly before we leave this question about technologies. So Awesome is, excited about the wearables. Wally's talked about some of the different security layers that we need to think about with them. And I'd love to just kind of get your take on some of this before we move to the next question.
Yeah, well, I'd sort of back up everything that's been said. I think in the short term, yes, they are more of a threat. It will be exciting to see where this goes in future. Like I say, we like getting hold of these things and trying them out in the lab and seeing how we're going to manage them in future. But the answer to a lot of this is data. So the more we can get and the more research we can do about how things are used and how to detect it, the better.
Yeah, there was a question that had come in about, do you make use of psychometric data, like responses or response times? And I know all three of your programs do, so I'll just answer that question very quickly. We often refer to those as data forensics or data analyses, because we take them out of the psychometric context and we actually look at them through more of an exam security lens. I think that's incredibly important. With some of the changes that we've seen across technologies, and Claire, I really liked your answer about, it's not this specific type of technology, because that's, to Wally's point, always going to be evolving, whether that's a miniaturized earbud or a button camera or my smart glasses. Are we seeing data that makes us feel less confident that these results are independently achieved? When we think about how we how we reach out to our stakeholders, whether that's other test takers or our score users, to help them understand the steps that you're taking to not only provide access, but to make sure that the results are results that can be relied upon. What are some of the suggestions that you have for continuing to build that stakeholder confidence in your exam, while continuously evolving. And Bassem, I'm going to actually ask you to start this, and then we'll go to Claire.
Thanks, Rachel. Yeah, so some things I know as a fact. Technology will keep changing. Your stakeholders will always want you to have answers for how you're dealing
Yes.
with those new upcoming threats. Your adversaries are quite clever at using all of this new tech that is coming out. So this is never going to change. What
Those
you
are our three
should do
facts.
though,
Okay.
what you should do though, in light of these facts is you should be the one bringing what is happening in terms of trends, in terms of
I
threats,
love
and in
that.
terms of what your adversaries are doing to your stakeholders. So what you want from your stakeholders is they want to feel comfortable, and they feel comfortable and safe when they see you as competent. And the competency that they want to see from you is you are on top of the threats. You know what the threats are, and you are developing mitigations. So you're investing in R&D, and you're showing that, hey, yes, these threats are changing, but we are nimble enough, agile enough, inventive enough to keep pace with that. And so the way I build confidence with stakeholders is I tell them about the threats. I don't wait for them to come to me and say, hey, what are you doing about hidden earbuds? I go to them and I say, there are hidden earbuds, and this is what I'm doing about it.
Love that. Claire, any thoughts from you on this one? And then we're going to go to our last question.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really key. It's communication is really important. Some of our stakeholders might not be in the depth of this like we are every day, and so they might not be aware of some of it or fully understand it. So we work with them to help them understand what kind of threats are we seeing, how can we reassure them that we are innovating, we're investing, we're on top of all the security, and help them have that confidence. So I think that communication is really important, and don't assume that they all understand the in-depths of deep fakes and things like that. We have to talk them through it and explain how we've got it all under control.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly important, that two-way communication. Can they ask you questions? Do they know where to go if they have questions? And then are you regularly helping them understand what steps you're taking to help secure your program and give them trusted and reliable results? So I want to just wrap up here with some thoughts about what we can do as an industry now to foster some collaborations in ways that strengthen exam security and integrity. And Bassem, I'm going to start with you.
Absolutely. So, Rachel, this is something that I think I've talked to all of my colleagues about at COTS and whenever we meet with each other. The more we can share data and approaches with each other, the more we can make cheating harder for malicious actors as a whole. Because guess what? They are hanging out in the same WeChat groups and WhatsApp groups. They are
Yes.
sharing data with each other. And as Wally said earlier in the day, hey, if I get caught cheating on, IELTS, maybe I'll go try TOEFL. And if I get caught on that, maybe I'll go try DET. So they get these multiple attempts at us collectively, whereas we always have to catch them like individually. Uh, and I know that the lawyers in the room are not always happy when I talk about sharing data and things like that. But when we meet each other, I find it to always be collegial. And so some of the ways that I find that my org gets supercharged is what is happening right now, meeting with all of you,
Right.
talking about all of this together, talking about openly what is happening in the industry right now, and just staying very communicative with each other.
Yes, I think there's so much value in that. We're not crossing any kind of anti-competitive lines. We're not talking about pricing or dividing territories or anything like that. We're talking about how do we make exams secure across the board, and how do we appreciate the threats that are out there collectively. Claire, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Whenever somebody's looking at offering a cheating service, they don't just pick one of our programs, they go for all of us. And so it's really important that we work together as much as we can. And, I absolutely agree with Bassem. The lawyers might get a bit nervous sometimes, but that working together is really important. And, places like the Conference on Test Security, COTS, which is in the UK this year, it's a good opportunity for the experts in this area to get together and talk about how can we strengthen assessment. Because I think sometimes when there's a big scandal about assessment, it just
Right.
dents public confidence, and they don't care which program it is either. They'll just,
Across the board.
do
Yep.
we not trust assessment anymore? Can we not trust
Yep.
exams? And so I think it's to benefit all of us if we work together to keep assessment secure.
Yes. And again, speaking as a lawyer in this room, that's not advocating any kind of anti-competitive activity. It's advocating sharing the threats that we're finding out there and what are some effective security layers that we can put in place to address those. Wally, I'm going to ask you the same question from you.
Right. Yeah, and just to reinforce, organized cheating organizations, they collaborate. We've seen it. They use social media. They do talk to each other and collaborate on what across any program on what, ways they've been able to commit fraud, which ones work, which ones haven't worked, oh wow, this, Claire's deploying a new technology. Don't go to Claire, wait until
Yeah.
we can figure out a way to get around it. So they collaborate. So we should definitely collaborate. And it should be part of our DNA is being collaborative because the threats impact all of us in all of our programs, our credentials, our licensure, our universities. It impacts all of us, and we're doing this to protect the honest test taker. So we should definitely collaborate. And we have one thing that the bad actors don't have, and that's we have Rachel, and we have the Credential Integrity Action Alliance. Perfect example of collaboration, right? And so we're fortunate, Rachel, because your organization is going after these bad actors and organized cheating and putting laws and getting new laws on the books to say that this is not acceptable, right? And so having a lawyer in the room is a great part of the team.
Yeah, thank you, Wally. Yes, and that is an industry effort that is making a difference. And I think, sharing these concepts, sharing these ideas, pooling our money, trying to have, the laws actually work for us in these instances, especially against these big businesses, is important. So with that, I know we're at time. I want to thank Bossum, Wally, and Claire for all of their time. They did a lot of work to prepare for this. And this is all volunteer time from all of us, really, just to try and make the industry better. Please, everyone here, attend the July coffee chat. There'll be some information coming out. We had a lot of questions in the chat here, Q&A, sorry that we weren't able to get to. So we would love to have you join us for that coffee chat. And feel free to reach out to Isabel or to me if you have ideas for future webinars or topics or guests. We would love to hear from you. And with that, that's a wrap for our webinar. Thanks everyone for attending, and hopefully we'll see you in July. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Bye.